Thank you for staying with us. The first leg of this conversation, in fact, the whole of the conversation, it's about leadership today. And of course, having a leadership that works and a system that, irrespective of who is at the end of affairs, everything should still work well. And then they say we'll reverse back to leadership. And Goodluck Jonathan Foundation, had a lecture over the weekend, and it was held in Accra, Ghana. And the man, former deputy governor, former vice president, and former president of Nigeria, Goodluck Jonathan, spoke, among many other persons there, and talked about the system and how leadership has been a problem. But then the process that is being manipulated, the electoral system, because I'm talking about countries that are practicing democracy, in which whatever that means to different persons on different continents, because it seems in Africa, democracy has its own definition, not just a conventional way of looking at it as the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, whatever that means to us here. Goodluck Jonathan said the manipulation that happened, with the system, with the process, with the electoral process, and all of these things is one of the bans of why we are where we are on the Africa, because it's not just about Nigeria. He extended it to African continent, but then this is we here in Nigeria. So we focus more on what is happening with us in Nigeria. And he said the manipulation that happens is one of the problems here, and not just. So we expand the conversation further down today. And you remember what Emir Sanusi Lamido said last week. We'll look into that in the course of the program as well, where he said Africans have, especially Nigerians, have been fortunate with very lousy leaders. So we take the two, but firstly, what Goodluck Jonathan said in Accra, Ghana, we allow you to take a look.
So we Africans who must begin to look at governance. The problem in Africa is our electoral system. People manipulate the elections to be there by all means. If we are doing proper elections, and if you are not doing well, people will vote you out. We may not even ask these questions. Because those who are not doing well, the population will vote them out. But in this case, people use government instruments to perpetuate themselves in power, even when the people don't want them. But it's always a difficult question to answer. Don't even ask me, because I don't have answer. But let me really thank all of you for this. We even talk about youth leadership. And one thing I personally believe is that the youths, may be wrong, are not necessarily looking for political offices. Why it appears like a country like in Nigeria, why it appears as if it is the political offices, that is the only business in the country. Where the economy is doing well and young people will find jobs or find businesses that will do, most of them in politics will not even go for politics. I was just an assistant director when I was approached to become a deputy governor of my state, and I was extremely reluctant. It's a story for another day. But if it is like, maybe if I had no job, I would have jumped on it 2 times. But because I had a source of income, and I was happy with what I was doing, I never wanted it. So I believe the young people themselves, it's because of the economies of our countries that this issue of the youth restiveness and so on is becoming so pronounced. So even civil society should interrogate this. In Nigeria, we have experienced young people that have managed the country. Of course, the First Republic, I cannot say their ages, but looking at history and the ages of those people at the time they died, they were very young people. After the death of the First Republic, the military took over, and they were young military officers. In fact, Gowon, who was the first military head of state.
All right, that was Goodluck Jonathan, former Nigerian president, in Accra, Ghana, speaking at the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation lecture. He said so many things that we'll look into in the course of the program, but the main, according to him, the biggest threat is electoral manipulation all across the continent. we have with us a leader of thought, a public affairs analyst and politician, the DG at the Heritage Center in Abuja, Dr. Katch Ononuju. He joins us this morning. Doctor, good morning.
Thank you very much for having me, as usual.
You are welcome. And of course, you just had Goodluck Jonathan speak on some of these issues, and he talked about electoral manipulation across Africa. And of course, why even the young people are maybe jumping at the offer in politics just because of the remuneration. But firstly, about electoral manipulations, your thought on what Goodluck Jonathan said?
Well, he is very correct. And that manipulation starts from the way the British left our country. The manipulations were there right by the British. The British manipulated our elections, and then they left standards and protocols that were continued because they wanted giving a known minority to dominate. The way they did it, the 3 regions, they made sure one region had the opportunity to veto whatever the other 2 regions did, and that was the southwest, the western region and the eastern region. So they had people in the northern region at that time whom they thought could protect their British interests, and that was how the manipulations started. That manipulations have continued today because those who took over from the British wanted now to institute what I would call settler colonialism in Nigeria. We are now a democracy again, and because those people don't have numbers, they now think manipulation plus violence is the only way that they can continue to sustain their positions of entitlement in Nigeria. Nigeria's democracy has now matured to a reality where you have a lot of awareness amongst the young people, who seems to form 70% of the country's population, active population. And that's why you saw, as somebody said from the presidency last week, that Peter Obi saw that restiveness with the youth, and he quickly seized it. The youth are where the story is. So, and if you have the youth, you have a machine that you definitely can use to disrupt the system. The youths are very important. And if you check sub-Saharan Africa, you check Nigeria, we have up to 90% of active players today between the ages of 18 and 36. Now that creates trouble for the old people who do not want to allow a new way. Another issue with these youths is that they have knowledge. The availability of the internet has brought awareness to everybody. So you are now dealing with a very different kind of Nigeria and a very different kind of Africa, where you now have the first generation of youths who became richer than their parents in their lifetime. So for me, it's a very interesting time in our country. And as far as I can see, nobody will be able to stop the momentum that the youth have already built. I think we have very, very interesting times going forward in today's sub-Saharan Africa.
All right, Dr. Ononuju, you've just dived into my question right there, how colonial legacies have actually affected leadership in Africa. Because, Dr. Ononuju, it seems as if our leaders, African leaders, a lot of them are still tied to the apron strings of the colonial masters. For instance, in Nigeria, our former president, General Muhammadu Buhari, he was always running to the UK. Now we have a president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, whose destination is France. So why is it that some nations, African nations, are seemingly tied to the apron strings of colonial masters? And we have a young leader in Africa, Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore, who would have none of it, okay? And he's making, he's implementing massive reforms in his country. But that's a military ruler right there. I don't want to go into details of that. So in your own opinion, why do we keep producing strong individuals but weak institutions in Africa. And I'll use Cameroon as an example. Paul Biya has been there since 1982. Dr. Ononuju, what is the problem with Africa? Nigeria has had independence since 1960. But up till now, we are still struggling. So why do we have strong individuals? Why do we keep producing strong individuals but weak institutions in Africa?
Well, Africa is going through a transition, and that transition is a symbiotic transition. You will say, why colonial? For over 400 years, the Europeans who tried to whitewash our history after their conquest, after if you'll allow me, all this started from their Berlin conferencing, their agreement to share Africa. Yes, and from the sharing of Africa, you had the colonial system. After the colonial system failed, you now had them still exacting strength and powers through a new colonial system where some of these old people, like you're talking about now, think that they need the strategic calculations and protocols established by the former colonial masters who, like, if you check Nigeria, who are they dealing with? Old people like Buhari. Buhari met the Archbishop who was previously in Nigeria working in the oil markets. And when he went back to the UK, he became an Archbishop. That didn't stop him from being an essential element of the stooges that work for the state. So he became a link for Buhari, whom he met when Buhari was also instrumented by colonials to do a coup to end our democracy. They do not like democracy. Democracy brings people who argue with them. They like what you call strong men rule. They tell the strong men what to do, the strong men do it for them, and then they create a symbiotic, I will maintain you in power, I will manipulate your people, and you will stay there, you will do what I want. So we're going through that transition, and that's where you now talk about Ibrahim Traore. You now have young people, whether you call it military or anything, from the words of President Goodluck you had, they use of, exacting force or coercive strategies to sustain advantage for whoever you call is, for me, it is still colonial. When they use those kind of things to coax people into keep umpire, in our case, INEC, or by having the colonials help them to manipulate themselves and stay in power, as you've seen in Paul Biya, as you're talking about now, in regards to President Tinubu going to France, working with Gilbert Chaguri. And that's also how he seems to have suggested the sharing of our oil wealth. He will give some to Gilbert Chaguri. He will give to another Indian company. He will then give to Oando. So this is the old fraudulent protocols which we must get away from. And we must fight to see that Tinubu is the last colonial stooge working against Nigeria's broader interests. You see it in Paul Biya's Cameroon. You see it in other African countries where, yes, the colonials have left, but they've continued their machinations that now suggest new colonial manipulations. So we have to get away from that. And that's why I said earlier to some people, the Russians were never part of those who colonized Africa. Let us try them. And you can see Traore is trying to work with the Russians. That secures him security-wise. And then Traore does what he can do. So I think Nigeria should do the same thing. Nigeria is now thinking about selling part of its sovereign wealth. It's a production sharing, percentages to who? You don't need to sell such things. That is wealth. Sorry, Dr. Ononuju. That's your money.
Dr. Ononuju.
It's like stealing.
Yeah, sorry to cut in. I just want you to make something clear. You said Ibrahim Traore is working with Russia. And you also said you think Nigeria should do the same thing. Are you talking about alliances with other nations? Is it economic alliances? What exactly do you mean? I just want you to make that clear.
What Russia provides to Traore is military security. You're seeing what's going on in South America. The US is preparing to go in there. Suddenly, China and Russia are in, telling you, you can't just get into South America again. So that means if we're going to join BRICS well. Don't be BRICS for attendance sake. No. Join BRICS and join BRICS well. Now, Africa should not lose this opportunity at using Russian security guarantees to stabilize their place and then take back their economies, their resources. You can see Nigeria is already beginning to do that, with Dangote coming in very strong, trying to now refine natural resources at home. Can you imagine if Dangote's refining of our local resources, but don't forget, it was that particular resource, our hydrocarbons, that was the reason for the Civil War. It's not all the stories that they tell, the British say this, the Fulani say that. These people don't mean well for us. It was the hydrocarbons that caused.
All right, I'm afraid you have been...
local refining of that hydrocarbon, we will go a long way if others join Dangote to locally refine our raw materials.
All right, Dr. Katch, we'll come back to you, but you raised something now that I feel it might be a concern as well about maybe Nigeria looking at the other end for alliances. Talk about Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traore being in alliance with Russia and what they bring. That many persons who will say this is what they have started with. Actually, this is how it starts rather, because Russia, okay, whatever, they are not for the Christmas. They are not there to babysit another country. Everybody always have their interest in whatever they do. But then it's not just about that. The US too, at a point, one would say maybe they meant well, or either they don't. Every country, the issue is why can't African countries in Africa stay, bond with themselves, form good alliances, even the trade zones that they do, some of them are bottlenecks with themselves. Why can't they do that as African brothers? Can't they stand alone? Must they always look for alliances in all of these things? But then we'll look into all of that after the break, because we are still talking about the system and how it is being manipulated, you know, the electoral system in Africa. Stay with us.